Isn't it amazing how a little motivation can get everybody moving? One of the best motivators in this respect is fear. The fear of might be coming out of the black that might want to consume you is enough to make the building of ships go absolutely insane. Everybody wanted to make sure that there was a fleet large enough and strong enough to make sure they can stop whatever might be coming out trying to consume us. Of course, with all this, the wealthy still insist on their ostentatious pleasure yachts, which take a very long time to build, even with nanomachines. Looking at these things, though luxurious, they are a bit expensive, but thankfully for most, thanks to new engines, there's no fuel costs at all. There is, of course, the cost of raw materials to make these ostentatious pleasure yachts and all, but aside from staff and crew, there's really nothing else after that. Well, of course, the basics food, water, and so on. Obviously, military vessels are going to take front and center. However, thanks to certain pull via wealth or political power, you would also see a bunch of these floating symbols to their own egos and, of course, inadequacies as they appeared every so often. Thankfully, as new manufacturing facilities come online, the creation of all sorts of private ships becomes very commonplace. So much so that it's almost as common as having your own car, van, or truck. Personal craft are usually straightforward in design, practicality above all else, making sure there's a place to sleep, a place to make your food, obviously the bridge, the engine compartment, and of course, everybody needs a shitter. Though most of these, at least from the outside, look pretty common to each other, inside's a different story. That's because many can't stop themselves from modifying and basically tweaking out the crap out of their shuttles. There's an additional advancement in design that's aided by a surprising source. The crabs. They began to trade. These absolutely imposing creatures never want to face off against humans, especially in their exosuits, realizing that the exosuits could grab a hold of their claws, their legs, and simply rip them off. Though, as long as they stay courteous, everyone would gladly trade the crab tech for foodstuffs. What surprised most was the crab's choices. They absolutely loved things like chicken, clams, coconuts of all things, and of course one that was a bit hard to get a hold of, whale meat. This turned out to be a delicacy for them, yet difficult to produce in large quantities for humans. Still, where there's a will to get technology, there's a way of getting a resource. After a few years of trade, human ships actually began to change shape, and you could see one generation from the other. The reason for the major change was because, along with the crab engines being tweaked and overhauled and looked over by a whole bunch of humans, and of course them sharing the way they got more out of their engines without blowing them up, it became standard that the engines now used at this point are 375 times more efficient than the original ones. Many ships built are actually halted, repurposed, redesigned, and then ready for sale and deployment a lot faster thanks to not only these engines being very efficient, easy to build, and they allowed the production facilities to operate a hell of a lot faster. This went both ways, of course, as the crabs actually purchased one of these new human engines at the cost of the crab's strongest battleship. Everyone thought they would simply grab a hold of the battleship and rename it, reflag it, and call it good. But no. When they received the battleship, everybody was surprised that it had been completely stripped of weapons, and before it was handed over, the engine compartment was completely hollowed out. Everybody wanted to know why, and they found out really quick as the military used it to test their weapons. And in short order, they realized that their weapons were in fact getting powerful enough as they turned this massive battleship, at least a third the size of Luna, into nothing more than a distorted hulk sitting there in space. The squids actually got a hold of humanity and recognized the advancement and called for talks. This took a while, but this led to another round of trade. And as it turns out, this increase of technology with another species made personal ships incredibly cheap. Along with human AI and upgrades being common, the biggest events now were not wars, but instead races and duels using testing weapons. One can look at this time as a golden age, though there was the threat from out there, as not all the species had calmed the hell down yet. Everybody realized that they now had time to enjoy themselves with this new technology. So, they did. While this was all happening, on the planet secured called Sanctuary, the new type of crocs called lizards seemed to be living very well. Humanity had brought all sorts of equipment to terraform the planet. A planet that took a long time to terraform, as it was originally considered a waste planet, something to be looked at and just toss your garbage at, use it for target practice, or simply, if you gotta go take a dump, leave it there because no one's gonna be there. Now, after everything they've done, the now lush and green covering is over 61% of the planet, with different types of rivers, large lakes, no oceans yet, but they're working on it, as this will take a long time to complete the entire planet. Most of the lizards like living quiet lives, many in fact taking human mates, but even with the CRISPR, procreation between the two species turns out to be completely impossible, at least through natural means. And because they can do things a bit unnatural, this does mean there are still children running around the planet, and the population is growing. Everyone on the planet can look up and take pride in everything they've done, with all the sweat, all the tears, all the time that they've put in, along with all the resources. The planet Sanctuary has gone from a level 3 death world all the way to a colony world, and is actually on its fast track to being labeled from a colony world to an agricultural world. And everybody knows that when that happens, they have a chance of becoming very, very wealthy. Above the planet, there's always a force of human craft, a military force. Several destroyers, frigates, corvettes, and always at least one cruiser hanging about. Every populated planet has an Earth-based force to protect them, at least until they can protect themselves. It's noted that places like Io, Luna, Mars, Venus, all these have their own fleets and do not require protection. However, they're not above accepting it when they need it. Everyone looks forward to the day when the world becomes independent, because then they can finally take a seat on the council floor and they will have their own banners, their own creeds, their own songs, and their own society, something to be called their own, something they have lived for. Yet this planet may never see it. It only took a moment for the sensors to start screaming that something was coming, and out of the void on the far side of the system, an entire croc armada jumps in from FTL, easily outnumbering the paltry human ships 100 to 1. Seeing this, they realized that this was not any type of fleet that was going to be interested in talking, no. They weren't going to send any type of delegates, no. They weren't going to talk, no. This was a fleet to come and take everything, take them out and enjoy the spoils of war. Immediately, every single ship on the human side called for support, including the planet itself, called out that they're going to need help. They're completely outgunned and they're going to be overrun unless somebody does something. Very quickly, the humans form a battle line and get ready to take on these crocs. They're not going to let them towards the planet, and if that means living or dying, that's what they're going to do. As the crocs advance, the human forces use their new engines to outpace and outmaneuver the croc armada. Once within range, human targeting systems prove their worth, as each shot of every single turret lands a hit. It's not always a slash, but it is a hit regardless. Sometimes taking out an engine, sometimes taking out a bridge, sometimes damaging weapons, sometimes making the ship simply explode, or, if they pierce it stem to stern, At least the ship is done. The human military ships maneuver as best they can, up, down, left, right, dip, diving, and dodging all over the place, trying to make sure they don't take a hit as well as they begin to empty their magazines into anything that's in front of them down on the planet. Everyone tries to get onto their shuttles and get the hell off of the planet. The signal was given that they need to evacuate. There is no way they can hold the line. Evacuate and save yourself was all they heard. If you stay behind, you're dead. As this is happening, more military human ships arrive as the shuttles begin to peel off the planet, spreading out in all different directions. It seems as though it's the universe's largest firework as all the shuttles try to get away from the planet as possible. The full planetary evacuation is taking place as 338,000 humans and lizards grab little items they can, grab their families, and leave. However, there's a problem. A big problem. None of these shuttles have FTL. They never needed it. They only needed these shuttles to simply get things from a ship in orbit back down to the planet or vice versa. Now they have no way of actually getting away. They did leave the planet. They got beyond their own lunar orbit, and they simply had to wait. Outside, the battle is getting very sporting. Regardless of the tech advantages, it is now a fight of quality versus quantity. And this is an issue as torpedoes are running out, missile pods are becoming empty, and point defenses go black on ammo. The energy weapons are running extremely hot to the point of many going into critical mass and simply either melting down or exploding. Those that just evacuated the planet hope that one vessel at least would break off. Can they break off and come pick us up? But none can afford to break off without the shuttles being destroyed as they're chased back towards them. All those in the shuttles have the same thought. Do we just have to wait here? Wait to be shot down? Wait to be taken? If we're taken, will we be forced into servitude, killed, or worst of all, eaten while we're still alive? Inside one of these shuttles, a female lizard holds her hatchlings very tight. Her lizard mate climbs out of the co-pilot seat and goes back to her and tries to calm the distressing young that seem to be freaking out, seeing that their mother is losing all control. She's shaking and crying, afraid that she's going to lose her hatchlings. The male lizard went over and wrapped his arms around her, trying to calm her shaking down, and whispered in her ear, "I won't let them have you. I'll protect you all somehow." The female turned and looked at him and said, "How? The humans can't save us. They can't hardly keep their own ships together." At that moment, a flash enters through the cockpit window as though to show that what she's saying is true. The human in the pilot seat has to shield his eyes from the flash that seemed to envelop, just for a moment, as a miniature sun. He looks forward and realizes what that is, and that was the cruiser being destroyed. The young mother is now even more scared as she knows exactly what just happened. She holds her young even closer to the point of almost squeezing the life out of them as they're trying to wiggle loose a little bit. However, she squeezes them more to calm herself than the young. Both of the young are actually too young to understand what is going on exactly. All they know is that they were taken out of their own school, their own class, and hurried home, rushed into the shuttle behind a couple of bags, and they immediately took off. This is the only time they've ever taken off in a shuttle, and the doors were actually closing as they're lifting off, as their human friend would always tell them, "Don't do that." The human flying the shuttle looks out of the cockpit and sees the battle off in the distance as he looks stoically, trying to figure out what is going to happen. He can see the human military ships arrive through jump points and immediately start unloading as the Croc Armada continues to advance. The few that come in, 1, 2, 3, 6 at a time, are not enough to stop the advance of so many vessels. Seeing all this, the female looks up, sees the battle, and she says, The human military can't save us. The human male goes to about hang his head, but then he sees something showing up way off in the distance. He looks at his scanners and immediately says, "They don't have to, Lucille." And without even turning his head, he continues by saying, "Rack, grab the kids. They're going to want to see this, and I guarantee they're going to enjoy it." Both reptilian parents look a little confused, but they pick up their children and move them towards the cockpit window. Looking out, they can see the light of thousands of FTL jumps coming in, but these are far too small to be military ships. They look in close, and of all different sizes and shapes, ships are coming in, all clearly human. And as they enter the system, they immediately turn and head straight towards the mass of colony shuttles. Across the open comms from one of the ships, they can hear a signal being sent to all the military personnel currently fighting off the Crocs. "Hey, you worry about the Crocs. We've got everything else covered." The shuttles around the planet immediately power up and begin to move towards the mass of human ships around them. From personal corvettes to cargo haulers to massive yachts, they all begin to send coordinates to either connect their shuttles to another ship or where to load the shuttle inside the bay. Rack and Lucille realize what's going on and begin to tear up with happiness as one of the children asks, "What are all those ships? Are they humans?" Lucille simply says, "No, my dear. They're hope." With that, the shuttle lurches forward as their human friend activates the engines and they make a mad dash to evacuate. All the colonists do the same in the shadow of a desperate struggle to hold the Croc Armada back long enough. Military ships currently struggle in a fanatic melee of receiving and returning fire. In the insanity, more ships are splashed on both sides. The moment they receive the all clear from the fleet of hope that had come to receive all the civilians, the military ships began a hasty withdrawal back to Sol. As the ships jump to FTL, a single frigate, the Shadow of Light, had a complete FTL drive failure. This means it can't spin up, it can't do anything, there's no way they can actually get out. As an act of defiance, as the last human ships are jumping out, the Shadow of Light maneuvered the ship back towards the approaching armada, went to flank speed, and charged into the heart of the Croc's massive battle group. The Shadow of Light fired every weapon system still functioning, flying directly towards the Croc's hive ship, and the Crocs realized what was going on. This massive capital ship does not have much in the way of large weapons, but they did fire everything they have. The crew of the Shadow of Light tried to keep her going as they kept taking more and more damage, but they did not stop. They did not stop as their weapons ran completely dry or overheated. They didn't stop as the engines began to go critical from the strain. They didn't stop as the hull was being stripped away as they charged even forward, stronger and more defiant. They went down like screaming banshees as they drove the frigate into the hive ship. As they connected, the frigate buried itself into the hull of that bulbous flying turd they call a hive ship. When it does, the engines go critical and detonate along with the nuclear scuttling charge. The force of this explosion is enough to force that giant ship backwards at 1.9 Gs, which is more than enough to injure or kill the entire crew on board, several 100,000 of them. With this act, the battle is over. The Crocs had won. However, this victory would not taste all that sweet. In fact, it would be quite bitter. Reason being that even the large hive ship still remains. Though its outer shell is intact, everyone inside is either on the ground wishing for death or is currently pasted against one of the bulkheads that it crushed itself against. In this respect, the Crocs had proven once again how they might be hard on the outside, but they're all squishy inside. Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you for joining me today on this new chapter of Crunchy on the Outside, Squishy on the Inside. Don't forget, if you haven't listened to the first few chapters, feel free to look in the description box below to find a link to the very first chapter of this series. Now before I go, let me say a few special thank yous to a few of my supporters, and those will be Prozac and Pancakes, SS Demon, Grog Vaughn, Guardian Sage, Sir, Douglas Scarborough, MTF Guard, Brian Kemp, and Erica Gem. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax, ejecting.